I think this actually marks the last of the rules that you are going to have to know for differentiation. I think this will round out your all your derivative rules after we get through today. So the first one is the derivative of an inverse. Remember, just as an inverse thing, let's just go over here, inverse review. If f is a function, that notation is the inverse. If f has the point a comma b, f inverse has the point b comma a. That's going to be a really important one that you're going to need to know. Sometimes for AP and Delta Math, at some point they'll say something like let g of x equal the inverse of f. They'll do something like that. Then they'll say, then the derivative of g is equal to 1 over f prime of g. Negative 1 over f prime of g. There's a negative out in front. So using the inverse notation, it can also be written like this. If you're differentiating f inverse of x, it's equal to negative 1 over f prime of the inverse. So it would look like that. So that's a pretty hard rule. I mean, if you wrote it out 10 times, you'd probably memorize it, but you'd have to write it out. We're going to use it. We're going to use it on a couple of examples, and then you'll get some practice on Delta Math. Okay? So take something like this. Take something like this. 1 second. Just a second. Let me do one thing real quick. I'm going to change one thing. I put a negative in there, and I don't think there's a negative in there actually. So let's take that out. Let's take that out. So take that negative out. There you go. Forgot that there wasn't a negative in there. I was thinking of something else. Anyway, so negative's not in there. Same rule, same thing. So let's look at this now. Oh shoot, I didn't put enough space. Maybe I did. We'll see. Notice on this one, AP will do this a lot too, where they'll say, this is the, and they do it because they don't want to mess with all this prime of an inverse kind of deal. So they're asking for this. So I find it really helpful. They're asking for the derivative of this inverse. I actually find it really helpful to do the following, to kind of go, okay, g prime of negative 1 is equal to 1 divided by f prime of g of negative 1. If I put it in there. So I just use that formula, and I just put the 1 in there because I want to kind of go, okay, Now let me see what I can do. Now, let's take a look at this. If we were to make a table over here, and we were to make a table of x and g of x, which remember is the inverse, and we're to use the idea that the x and the y coordinate flip-flop, that idea that I had up there with a and b, is what that means is, notice if I take these two rows, these two columns, this one here and this one here, and I flip-flop them, that means -1 is going to map to -5. -2 is going to map to -3. 0 is going to map to -1. 1 is going to map to 6. 6 is going to map to 8. 9 is going to map to 10. So all I did is I flip-flopped those two to get that new table. Now, why is that important? Well, that's important because now I know what g of -1 is. I know what g of -1 is. If I highlight what I'm trying to find, there's g of -1, and I need to put that in right here. And if I do that, then I would have 1 divided by f prime of -5. Now, the good thing about that is notice that if I highlight where that is, there's -5 and f prime right there. That's what I'm going to put in for all of this stuff. So I end up with an answer of 1/1, or just 1. So I was able to kind of flip-flop things around and kind of manipulate it until I got what I needed. Go back and pause that, replay that if you need to. So let's take a look at this one. This is a little bit different. It says, you got this function f defined by this. It says that f has the point, here's a point on f. So let me get this, let's see. This is on f, so the point -3, -1 is on g, if that's true, right? Well, let's see what we got to deal with. G prime of -3 is equal to 1/f prime of g of -3, according to our rule. Well, we know g of -3 is -1, right? So we know we have 1/f prime of -1. Oh, well, the only thing we need now is we need to figure out what the heck f prime of -1 is. Well, f prime of x, using this function up here, f prime of x is equal to 3x squared plus 8x plus 6. So f prime of -1 is 3 times -1 squared plus 8 times -1 plus 6, or 3 minus 8 plus 6, or in this case, 1. So again, doesn't always work out this way, but I happen to pick another example that works out to just be 1. All right, so you're going to have a couple problems like that. Now, the other thing you have is we got 3 new rules. Okay, so these are new rules to you. 3 new rules for the inverse trigonometric function. So, a way of writing the inverse, the sign looks like this. So just know the sine -1 x is the same thing as the arc sine of x. It's not equal to 1 over the sine x. Don't do this. No, don't do that. That's not what it is. It's actually equal to the arc sine of x. Okay? So this derivative is 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. The only thing that is going to be hard about these is just memorizing these rules, because the questions are never ever really too terribly difficult. In fact, if you have the rules for the arc sine and the arc cosine, and finally the arc tangent would be the only ones that you would have to know. The rules are really the hardest thing to memorize, because the questions are not. The questions are not bad. What I mean by that is, here's a particular question, okay? If f is equal to the arc cosine, find f prime. Well, f prime of x is equal to negative 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. So if we're asked then to figure out f prime of the square root of 3 over 2, that's equal to negative 1 over square root of 1 minus square root of 3 over 2 squared, which is just an arithmetic problem now. If I simplify this arithmetic problem, that's negative 1 over the square root of 1 minus 3/4, or negative 1 over the square root of 1/4, or negative 1 over 1/2, which is just negative 2. And that's just arithmetic, right? I mean, the rule was done as soon as we took the derivative, we were done. Now, here's another example. This is more similar to what you saw on AP Classroom, saying just evaluate this limit. What you have to realize is this is just asking, this question is just saying, if f of x is equal to the arc tangent, find f prime of 2/3. That's all this question is asking. It's not a hard question. You just have to recognize that that is the definition of a limit, or definition of a derivative. So it's just asking you to find the derivative of the arc tangent. You know that back up here, the derivative of the arc tangent was 1 over 1 plus x squared. So this is equal to 1 over 1 plus 2/3. Sorry, I keep on writing 3/2. 2/3 squared. Because f prime of x is equal to 1 over 1 plus x squared. And then it's just a matter of doing a little bit of arithmetic on this. This is 1 over 1 plus 4/9. So this is 1 over 13/9, or 9/13. And you can't reduce that fraction. So that's that one. Those are actually really easy rules, probably some of the easier rules, as long as you memorize them, because the questions won't be hard with them. You'll never have to do anything super difficult with them. Hopefully that helps. Good luck. I'm going to try to stop this video now.